Hey, welcome back. I'm glad you're here tonight. Really. I know you could be scrolling endlessly, lost in tiny glowing screens and thoughts that won't quiet down, but instead you're here, letting my voice slip into the shadows of your room. Maybe you've already turned the lights down. Maybe you're curled up, blanket pulled up to your chin, a pillow soft against your cheek. That's good. You want to get comfortable for this. Tonight, we're going to drift somewhere unexpected. Somewhere that history books, in all their dusty glory, often skip over or wrap in polite, prudish little bows. But you and I, we're not so easily fooled by stiff pages and official versions, are we? No, we're going to peek behind those heavy oak doors, through corridors that echo with steps long, turned to dust, and we're going to listen. Picture this. It's a bitterly cold evening in the heart of medieval Europe. The castle towers stand like ancient sentinels against the dark sky, all bruised purple and black. The wind snakes through arrow slits, whining soft complaints that nobody inside hears or cares to hear. Somewhere deep inside this fortress, past the rattling kitchens and the hay-strewn stables, a gathering stirs. Imagine you're a servant, candle in hand, creeping along a narrow passage that smells of damp stone and old secrets. The flame flickers, throwing your shadow onto the walls, an elongated ghost of yourself, trembling with each shiver in the draft. You hear muffled laughter, not the rowdy roar of the feasting hall. That's a floor above, where the respectable guests gorge themselves on boar and turnips. No, this is something softer, more intimate, threaded with the kind of giggle that makes your spine tingle with curiosity and fear. They say these halls once held nothing but prayers, that monks trudged through them with bowed heads, lips whispering Latin confessions to walls that never tattled. But kingdoms change, don't they? Thrones are toppled, alliances shift, and stone chapels become wine cellars. Wine cellars become secret chambers for those who crave more than bread and faith. Now, run your fingers along the rough wall. Feel the chill seep into your skin. Smell the mustiness, the faint scent of smoke drifting under a hidden door. Beyond that door, well, we're not there yet, but if you lean in, you can almost hear it. The clink of a goblet set down too hard, the rustle of silk slipping off shoulders, the low sigh of confession murmured into someone's neck. Isn't it strange? The same nobles who commanded armies and knelt in ornate cathedrals on Sunday mornings could spend Saturday night tangled in forbidden pleasures. Some might say hypocrisy. Others might say human nature, raw, unstoppable, deliciously flawed. But don't worry, I won't rush you in there just yet. Let's linger here a moment more. Let's imagine the flicker of torchlight casting wild shapes on ancient stone. A tapestry shifts in a breeze, or was that a hand beckoning you closer? You can almost taste the sweet, sticky wine, the scent of rose oil mixed with sweat, and the musky tang of old furs draped across bare skin. And outside, the world sleeps. Peasants huddle under threadbare blankets, dreaming of harvests and saints. Soldiers stand guard on the ramparts, their breath misting in the cold, boots crunching frost. None of them know, or dare to know, what's happening here. But you do. You, lying there in your bed tonight, eyes heavy, heart thrumming with the warmth of curiosity. I'm here to keep you company while we drift further in. Let your breathing slow. Let your mind wander deeper down these corridors where shadows dance and secrets cling to the rafters. We'll leave the heavy judgments for tomorrow. Tonight, we're just guests, welcome ones at that. So, before we slip behind that final door, just breathe for me. In and out. Let the weight of your blankets press you down like the hush of centuries above these stone vaults. You're safe here in the dark with me. We'll follow the whispers soon enough. The flicker of forbidden halls is calling. But for now, just listen. Next, we'll let ourselves drift to the very first flicker of decadence, the tiny spark that lit centuries of rumor and ruin. But don't worry, we'll go slowly. After all, history is never in a hurry when it has secrets to keep. Sleepy yet? Good. Stay with me. There's more to come. Secrets layered in silk, sealed in wax, and hidden behind these ancient walls, just waiting for you to press your ear closer. Next, let's drift into that very first flicker of decadence, that moment when all the rigid lines and rules began to fray at the edges. You see, nothing starts as a grand spectacle, no matter what the legends say. Behind every scandalous gathering, every whispered tale of satin masks and flickering candles, there's always a seed. A quiet moment when temptation wins over propriety, when curiosity hums louder than fear. Picture this: a great hall, all vaulted beams and echoes of holy hymns long since silenced. The hearth spits sparks into the smoky air, struggling to warm these thick stone walls. The tables groan under the weight of roasted meats, sticky pies, and bread so fresh the steam curls upward like a ghost. At the center sits a young lord, or perhaps he's older than he looks, the lines around his eyes just hidden by the glow of the firelight and the haze of wine. His ringed fingers drum against a pewter goblet, and every so often his eyes dart to the far end of the table. There a lady laughs, a sound too bright, too unguarded for a hall where priests once prayed for chastity and charity. He catches her gaze. A flicker passes between them, a half smile, a tilt of the head. That's all it takes. Imagine that tiny gesture, the way a single candle flame can shudder and grow into an inferno if you feed it enough air. Around them, lesser lords and hangers-on fill their bellies, bellow songs that echo up into the beams, oblivious to the spark that's about to catch. But not everyone is so blind. There's always the watchful one, a cousin, a trusted advisor, or perhaps a scullery maid lingering too long behind the tapestry with a tray of leftover cheese. She sees that look. She feels the sudden hush, the charged pause when the lady stands and slips out the side door. Minutes later, the young lord follows, and the night takes its first delicious turn into something that won't be recorded in any official ledger. Imagine waking up the next morning to the hush of snow falling on the castle courtyard. Servants scuttle about, scraping icy slush from the stones, pretending not to see the footprints that lead away from the great hall's side door to the old chapel. The same chapel where that lady's father once knelt, begging God for a son. The irony tastes almost sweet on your tongue, doesn't it? Now, not every noble gathering spun so quickly out of control. Sometimes it started slower, with a jest at the table, a dare whispered over a goblet. I'll show you mine if you show me yours is older than any language you speak tonight. The words may change, but the mischief behind them, that's carved into human bone. And it wasn't always the lords and ladies who stoked the first embers. Picture the traveling bard who strums his lute at the feast, his voice threading a tale of mythical lovers, gods who tangled themselves together under moonlight, heedless of mortal shame. A song like that drips into hungry ears like warm honey. The lady who blushes at the first verse might lean closer by the third, her lips wet with wine, her thoughts far from her mother's prayers. Some say these early secret gatherings were harmless, just a stolen kiss in a dark corridor, a forbidden hand under the table. But here's the curious part. Rumors love to multiply. One tryst turns into 10 by the time the story reaches the village well. A single rumor becomes a cautionary tale, then a fantasy, then, eventually, a blueprint. Imagine the Lord's steward, weeks later, slipping into the buttery to find his master leaning too close to the same lady, this time with friends gathered round. Jokes fly like arrows, laughter grows too loud. A single candle burns on the table, its wax dripping onto the platter of half-eaten meat. One by one, curious souls drift closer, a knight fresh from battle, a lady bored of embroidery, a priest too deep in his cups to remember his vows. That's how it begins, not with a grand decree or a midnight summons carved into wax, but with the slow surrender to something older than crowns and castles. A need to forget the cold drafts and the endless wars and the biting stench of plague that always lurked outside these thick walls. Pleasure, after all, is its own rebellion. Can you see it now? The candles flickering against ancient stone, laughter echoing through once holy halls. A hand grasping another under the table, brushing away the crumbs of crusty bread to find something far sweeter to bite into. The priest slips away first, mumbling apologies. He will confess tomorrow when daylight scrubs the sin from his tongue. But tonight, he leaves them there, shadows tangled among rushes and pelts. When dawn breaks, the castle will look the same. The cook will ladle out porridge. The guards will stomp their boots on the icy ground, pretending they hear nothing strange behind the shuttered windows. But a new rumor will drift through the kitchens, a story of what might have happened in the hush between the final toast and the rooster's cry. And that rumor will glow like an ember, carried from mouth to mouth until someone dares to fan it into flame again. So, rest your head a little deeper into the pillow. Let the warmth of your blanket hold you like those stone walls held so many secrets. We're just at the beginning, you and I, the first flicker of decadence, the first sigh in the dark. Next we'll see how these illicit sparks turn into invitations wrapped in velvet, promises sealed behind heavy doors, and whispers that could cost a man his head. Don't drift too far yet. The fire's only just begun to crackle. Stay with me. There's more to hear, if you're brave enough to listen. Next, let's follow that ember as it grows bolder, slipping from reckless glances at the feast to something more deliberate, more dangerous. Because a single tryst in a dark hallway might be explained away as passion's accident, but an invitation, that's intent carved into parchment. Picture this, a great stone castle standing against a winter dusk, all gray ramparts and drifting snow like sifted flour falling from a kitchen maid's hand. Inside, fires crackle behind heavy draperies, but the corridors are cold, and the air tastes faintly of tallow smoke and wet wool cloaks. Somewhere deep within these walls, a hand scratches out words by the light of a flickering candle. A letter so careful, so precise, that each line feels like a gamble with the gallows. Imagine waking up to find such a note tucked inside your slipper by the bed, or slipped into your prayer book, the ink still faintly smudged where the writer's hand trembled. There's no signature, of course, only the shape of the words themselves, written in a flourish that hints at status but never says it outright. If you're wise, you'll burn at the moment you've memorized its meaning. But humans, we rarely do what's wise when the heart beats so loud. Some invitations came wrapped in scraps of velvet, a scrap torn from a lady's gown, the same shade she'll wear when she slips through the back halls tonight, or a single pressed flower tucked inside a wax seal, a lily if you're meant to keep your mouth shut and your eyes open, a rose if you're invited to do much, much more. And it wasn't always love, you know. Lust has many flavors, some bitter, some sweet. Some notes were nothing more than commands. Come to the West Tower when the moon is full. Bring no maid. Tell no one. Sometimes it wasn't even paper, just a ring slipped off during a dance, pressed into a palm slick with sweat, the faintest brush of a thumb against a pulse that races faster than any horse on the King's Road. Picture the messenger, too, the poor stable boy, breath clouding in the icy air, his boots leaving dark patches on the straw as he trots between chambers. Or the maid who pockets extra coins for carrying words she'll never dare to read. She tucks them in her bodice, heart hammering when she hears footsteps behind her, praying it's not the steward who'll search her pockets and find a reason she wears a sly smile when she sweeps the corridor. Imagine the dread, because these invitations were no small risk. A single slip, a note falling from a sleeve, or a tongue loosened by too much wine could mean disgrace. Or worse, depending on who caught you. There were lords with dungeons deep enough to swallow your name forever. Bishops eager to purify sins with a noose and a sermon. And yet, somehow the notes kept finding hands, trembling fingers unfolding wax seals in candlelit corners. Picture the thrill, though, that sharp rush in your chest as you break the seal. The warmth that pools in your belly as you read the curving words. The torchlight flickers against the stone wall, making the shadows dance, as if they, too, carry secrets in their swaying shapes. You glance over your shoulder. No one there, or so you hope. Some invitations were sent by lovers who burned for each other, desperate to hide in linen closets or locked solar chambers, even if just for an hour before the dawn bells rang. Others were more calculated. Come tonight, bring the deed. Less talk of favors owed and debts forgiven. Some of these velvet messages opened the door to pleasure. Others opened a trapdoor to ruin. And don't think the nobles were always clever. Sometimes the paper was too scented, the handwriting too obvious. Sometimes the wrong eyes found the letter. The steward's wife, say, noticing the scrap of silk tucked inside the old knight's belt. Or the bishop's manservant, who found a note wedged under the chapel door and read every word before feeding it to the flames, but not before memorizing each name it named. But here's the part that makes the candles flame gutter and flare all at once. These invitations, these scraps of coded desire, often bound the guests together long before they touched a drop of wine or laid a trembling hand on the curve of someone else's hip. Secrets are delicious, but sharing them, oh, that's the honeyed poison that makes even the most pious heart lean in closer. So, you see, behind every grand tale of noble orgies and forbidden feasts, there's a hidden history of trembling quills and sweaty palms, of velvet scraps that slipped from sleeve to sleeve. Each note was a doorway, and once you stepped through, you were part of something that could never quite be unsaid. Imagine you, lying here now, safe in your blankets while your mind drifts through these damp corridors. You can almost feel the rough parchment under your thumb, the heat rising in your throat as you read a message meant for no eyes but yours. How quickly your heart would race. How softly you'd tuck that note away, as if it might burn you if you held it too long. Rest your head. Close your eyes. Hear the faint rustle of paper, the soft snick of a wax seal cracked open in the dark. This is just the beginning. Next, we'll follow these brave souls as they slip into the shadows and gather in secret places, chambers and cellars where only the bold and the reckless dared to go. But for now, breathe. Let the whispers settle on your pillow like the hush of parchment against skin. You're safe here, warm and hidden, listening to secrets wrapped in velvet. Next, we slip past the rustle of parchment and the hush of sealing wax, and follow those velvet invitations to the places where they blossomed into something far more dangerous than ink on paper. Because secrets need walls, thick, old walls that don't flinch when they're asked to hold 100 heartbeats worth of sin. And so, the secret venues were born, cellars and chambers and dusty old corners of castles that seemed made for shadows to linger. Picture this. A snow-clad fortress perched on a lonely hill. The moon sliding through tatters of cloud like a gossip trying to peek through a window. At the gate, the guards huddle against the cold, shoulders hunched, pikes planted in the frozen ground. Their eyes sweep the courtyard, but not the passage behind the stables. That narrow little door framed by mossy stones and an arch so low even a noble must duck. Imagine you pushing that door open. Feel the swell of damp air, the smell of old straw and earth, a scent as old as the fortress itself. Your boots scrape on flagstones worn smooth by feet that came before you, feet that had to step carefully because these walls remember everything. The first room you find is nothing but a storage cellar. Barrels of wine stacked like soldiers waiting to be uncorked, crates of salted fish wrapped in burlap. A single torch sputters on the wall, its flame bending each time a door opens and another hooded figure slips through. There's laughter, but it's muffled, like the coo of doves trapped in a chimney. You follow the sound down a corridor so narrow you brush your shoulders against damp stone on either side. And then, the secret chamber. Some call them hunting lodges, others private chapels fallen out of use. A clever lord might tell the world it was nothing more than a storehouse for barrels and grain. But open the right door, push aside the right tapestry, and you'd find a place where velvet and fur lay draped across hard benches, where rushes covered the floor to muffle the shuffle of boots. Candles smoked in iron sconces, their wax dripping onto ancient carvings that once depicted saints, now nothing but vague shapes staring down at sins they could not stop. Picture the first guests, their cloaks damp from snow, pressing hands to the warm stone hearth as they slip off layers one by one, gloves, hats, the heavy outer robes that mark their status. Here, status fades like mist on glass. The steward who bows to the duke in daylight might find himself kissing the hem of a countess's gown tonight, the same gown that will be cast aside before the hour is through. Some venues were deep underground, real labyrinths beneath castles and manors. Cellars where wine aged in barrels, sure, but also passages built long before, when fleeing raiders or siege meant survival. These tunnels turn out to be just as handy when the threat was scandal instead of swords. Imagine stumbling down rough steps in your fine leather shoes, clutching the wall for balance while your eyes adjust to the torchlight. The air down there is cooler, touched by the scent of mildew and secrets that never quite dry out. Meanwhile, in wealthier courts, the secret venues grew more elaborate. Think velvet draperies to muffle sound, fur throws scattered across stone benches, and goblets of spiced wine left on every little table carved from heavy oak. There might be a lute player in the corner, plucking notes so softly they sound like a heartbeat in your ear. Sometimes a harp, its strings quivering with a melody so sweet it almost covers the quiet gasps echoing against the walls. Picture this. A lady slips through a curtain, her hair pinned high, a mask covering her eyes, but not the flush of her cheeks. She pauses at the threshold, letting her gaze drift across the chamber. The half-naked courtiers lounging on cushions, the glint of candlelight on rings and bare skin, the hush that falls when fresh blood enters the room. For a moment, she feels it all, the danger, the thrill, the possibility that by morning she may have gained a secret so precious it could ruin kingdoms if spoken aloud. Not all venues were grand. Some were little more than abandoned cottages on the edge of the woods, hunting cabins with floors of packed earth, a single window shuttered tight against prying eyes. There, hay and pelts formed makeshift beds, the smoke from a tiny hearth curling into the rafters where barn owls perched, blinking down at sins they neither judged nor cared to remember. Imagine the noise, muffled giggles, soft moans swallowed by fur blankets, The clink of a jug as wine is poured again and again until tongues loosen and names slip out that should have stayed hidden. A fox might slink past the threshold, drawn by the smell of roast meat left to cool, while its owners found other appetites to feed. And when dawn came, the secret venues breathed out their confessions. Rushes trampled, candle stubs spent, wine spilled like blood on the stone. Servants would creep in to sweep up the evidence, fingers crossed that no token was left behind. A forgotten ring, a torn scrap of velvet, a ribbon tangled in the rushes. Sometimes, though, something always did remain. A scent in the air, a stain that no amount of scrubbing could lift, a hush that fell when that door was mentioned again in daylight. So here we are, you and I, standing in the hush of these stone chambers that never asked for prayers, but learned to cradle secrets like a mother cradles a child. Rest your eyes. Feel the chill of the walls, the warmth of the hearth. Breathe in the scent of candle wax and spilled wine. Next, we'll drift toward the gatekeepers, the loyal and the cunning who watched these doors, held the keys, and sometimes knew far more than was safe to know. But for now, stay with me here, in the hush of the secret venues, where whispers never quite fade and the stone remembers everything. Meanwhile, behind every heavy door and velvet curtain, there was always someone standing in the shadows, someone who held the keys, both real and metaphorical. They were the gatekeepers, the ones who knew when to unbolt the side passage, when to snuff out the torches along the main corridor, so no wandering guard might glimpse a masked figure slipping through. The ones who traded silence for coin or favor, or sometimes a single whispered secret tucked behind their ear like a lover's promise. Picture this. The castle steward, a man whose hands are rough from counting coin and sealing barrels, yet whose eyes miss nothing. His chambers lie just off the kitchens, close enough that he hears the clang of pots at dawn and the hiss of gossip at dusk. It's he who nods to the guard at the gate, a subtle tilt of the chin that means, let this one through. No questions. Or imagine the lady's maid. No older than 20, her hair always hidden beneath a linen cap, her apron forever smudged with candle wax, and ash from sweeping fireplaces long after her mistress drifts off to bed. Except her mistress does not drift off to bed, not truly. The maid knows every step of the ritual. The lady's hair pinned up, the heavy silk gown exchanged for a simpler cloak, the quiet hiss of boots pulled on instead of soft slippers. She watches it all with wide, careful eyes, pressing the memory deep in her mind like a pressed flower she will never show but always keep. And when the lady returns hours later, cheeks flushed, cloak smelling faintly of wood smoke and wine and something raw, the maid unties the laces, brushes out the hair, wipes away the hint of wax drips from where a candle was held too close to bare skin. No words pass between them, only the soft scratch of the brush through tangled locks. But secrets are sticky things. They cling to the bristles, curl themselves into the shadows under the bed. The gatekeepers were not just servants. Sometimes they were guards at the gatehouse, faces hidden by chainmail coifs, eyes glinting under torchlight. They might share a nod with the stable boy, slipping a hooded figure through the courtyard at midnight. Maybe they'd look the other way in exchange for a jug of strong cider, or the promise that their younger brother would be given a better post come spring. Imagine the thrill that tingled in their fingertips, because the ones who stand at the threshold of sin often hold more power than the sinners themselves. They know who arrived first and who left last, whose mask slipped, whose hands clutched at forbidden flesh in the darkness. The guard at the back stairs has seen a bishop slip through those halls with a velvet ribbon clutched in his fist, a gift from a lady who would faint dead away if the wrong ears ever heard. Sometimes the gatekeepers did more than open doors. Picture the steward, ducking into the wine cellar to drag a half-drunken noble back to the right chamber before he stumbled into a hallway full of servants with wagging tongues. Or the maid pressing her ear to the panel of the Lord's study, eyes wide when she hears not sighs of pleasure, but whispers of blackmail and bribery tangled with the rustle of silks. Rumors were currency, you see, and the gatekeepers became the wealthiest of all. Not in gold, perhaps, but in leverage. A single word, slipped to the wrong ear, could topple a marriage, ruin a family's name, or fill a bishop's purse with enough coin to build a new chapel. Whispers clung to the walls like cobwebs, harmless to look at, until you walked through them and felt their sticky threads catch on your sleeve. And they gossiped, of course they did. Picture the scullery maids gathered around the kitchen hearth at dawn, their hands raw from scrubbing greasy platters, breath rising in little clouds in the cold stone room. They swapped tales between yawns, half giggles and half prayers. Did you hear who slipped into the West Tower last night? My cousin's sweetheart guards that door. Says he saw the Duchess herself. No mask at all, only her pearls around her throat. The cook clicks her tongue, pretends not to listen. But she remembers, and tomorrow she might trade that story for an extra loaf of bread or a warm blanket to cover her own sins. Even the animals seemed to carry secrets in those halls. Cats slinked along corridors, their fur brushing against velvet hems, eyes like polished stones glinting in the torchlight. The stable dogs pricked their ears at footsteps on the gravel path behind the stables. But who would they tell? And the horses, stamping in the straw, caught scents they did not understand, heard muffled laughter drifting across the courtyard in the dead of night. Picture, too, the hush that fell when things went wrong. Because not all gatekeepers were loyal. Some took bribes from both sides, whispering warnings to a jealous husband or a blackmailing rival. One word to the wrong ear, and the secret venues would sit empty for a month, maybe a year, while heads rolled figuratively or sometimes quite literally. But the walls always remembered, and the next time, the masks were tighter, the torches fewer, the gatekeepers chosen more carefully, rewarded more richly, threatened more cruelly. Because once you've tasted the power of a whispered secret, you can never quite let it go. So here we stand, you and I, in the hush between footsteps and closing doors. Feel the cold flagstones under your feet, the warmth of a bribe pressed into a trembling palm, the prickle of eyes watching from behind the tapestry. Let your breath slow as you imagine the flicker of a lantern bobbing down a hidden passage, guided by the one who holds the key. Next, we'll slip beyond these guarded thresholds to see what waits on the other side. Silk gowns, perfumed skin, music that hums through the blood like wine. But for now, breathe in the whispers. Rest your eyes in the hush of secrets kept and sold by the loyal, the cunning, the careless. We're only just beginning to see what lies behind the doors they keep. Next, slip a little deeper with me. Now that we've crept past the gatekeepers, the watchful eyes and loose tongues, imagine what happens just beyond that final door. Because once you're safely inside, the flicker of candles throwing gold across ancient stones, you're no longer the lady who says her rosary at dawn or the knight who bows at court. Here, you must become something else. And the first step is always dressing for sin. Picture this. The chamber is warm from dozens of bodies and the glow of hearths that never quite reach the corners. A long table sags under half-drunk goblets and platters scattered with fruit, sticky peach flesh, grapes rolling into shadows. But before the taste of sweetness, there's the ritual of the fabric. Imagine a lady, her back turned to the room, her fingers trembling at the ties of her gown. Silk, heavy and slick as water, slides off her shoulders. It pools around her feet with a sigh. like a secret that can't be contained any longer. Beneath, layers peel away, a chemise so thin it clings to her skin in the candlelight. The air smells of rose oil, beeswax, sweat already beginning to bloom under the arms. Near her, another figure adjusts a mask, velvet, embroidered with tiny gold threads that catch the light each time they breathe. The mask isn't just disguise, it's permission. It says, leave the name you wear in daylight at the door. Be nothing but a mouth, a heartbeat, a tremor in someone else's palm. Men aren't spared the same transformation. The noble knight who rode through mud and blood wears silk now. 2. A robe cut so loose it gapes at the chest, revealing a glimpse of scars that trace their own stories. Some wear nothing at all beneath their cloaks, a daring thing on a cold night in a stone hall. But the firelight and flushed skin banish any thought of drafts. Picture the gestures, small, clumsy, sweet in their hesitance. A woman pins up her hair, only for another to tug the pins loose moments later, letting dark strands tumble over pale shoulders. A man slips a silver chain from his neck, pressing it into someone's palm as if to say, hold this for me. Hold this piece of who I am until the sun comes back. Not every outfit is fine. Sometimes it's the roughest linen, hastily pulled off and bundled into corners. Sometimes borrowed furs, still carrying the smell of the animal, while pungent, layered over perfume dabbed at the wrists and behind the knees. The mingling scents are enough to make your nose tingle. Rose water, musk, the sour tang of wine spilled on a silk sleeve, the bite of sweat and the earthy reek of rushes underfoot. Imagine the touch of fabric, how it feels when you loosen a knot that's held tight all evening. The soft scrape of lace across a collarbone, the sudden cold when a shoulder is bared, and the sound, a gasp swallowed into laughter, the slide of beads rolling off a bodice and across the floor to hide among the straw. Masks were not always elaborate. Sometimes they were nothing more than scraps of cloth tied behind the ears, perfumed to disguise the scent of the wearer's hair. Other times they were finely carved, half-faces shaped like swans or foxes, painted with tiny, delicate flowers that could never survive daylight. The irony? The masks revealed far more than they hid. A glance became a question, a tilt of the chin, a dare. You could lie with your lips, but your eyes told stories too bright for the shadows to fully swallow. Imagine the hush that falls when the last ribbon is loosened. The pause before the music begins again. You see bodies that look like yours, not polished marble statues, but warm, trembling, marked by life. A scar on a belly from a childhood fever, stretch marks tracing hips, a bruise half hidden by a lover's careless bite. All these imperfections are the real costume here. Proof that every participant is more than lace and silk. There were rumors, of course, that the most powerful nobles kept trunks of special garments just for these nights. Gowns with hidden slits that fell open at a tug, breeches that unlaced with a flick of deft fingers. Some whispered of entire rooms lined with masks. Each mask a different persona. The chaste nun, the cunning fox, the lion-hearted knight. Choose your face, they said. Choose who you are tonight. But the clothes were only half the story. Picture the mirrors, polished bronze or silver, propped against old stone walls. Imagine catching your own reflection as you slide out of a sleeve, seeing yourself half-lit by candlelight, pupils wide, mouth parted in something that might be guilt or hunger or both. You are not who you were at dinner. You're something older than titles, older than shame. When the final knot is undone, when silk lies in heaps and only skin remains, there is a moment when the room holds its breath. No one wants to be the first to move, to cross that trembling line between dressing for sin and sinning itself. And yet, someone always does. A hand grazes a shoulder. A laugh bubbles up, too bright, and someone hushes it with a kiss. So, as you lie there now, your own blanket's soft around your bare arms, imagine you're watching from a corner, safe, unseen. Feel the weight of the mask against your cheeks, the rush of warm air against newly exposed skin. Smell the perfume mingling with sweat. Taste the wine on your tongue, though you've not sipped a drop. This is the hush before the music swells, before bodies press together and the night truly begins. Next, we'll slip a little closer to those who see it all from the shadows. The servants who know too much, who sweep away the feathers and the candle stubs, carrying these secrets back to their cots. But for now, breathe in the silk, the warmth, the quiet thrill of skin half hidden in flickering light. Here, in this room, everyone is half dressed in velvet lies, and it's just beginning. Next, let's drift our eyes away from the lords and ladies draped in silk and velvet masks. Let's slip behind them, through the hush of heavy curtains and the crack of a half-open door, to where the true witnesses always waited, the servants. Those who scrubbed the floors slick with spilled wine, who gathered up silken stockings dropped carelessly by trembling hands, who saw far more than the nobles ever imagined they did. Picture this. The dawn is still a rumor, darkness pressed against narrow windows rimed with frost. In the smoky warmth of the scullery, a young kitchen boy sits on a rough wooden stool, boots caked in straw and mud. His eyes are rimmed red with fatigue. His breath fogs in the chill that clings to the corners of the keep. He's been up half the night, shoveling embers into dying hearths, carrying up wine jugs that come back sticky with fingerprints and smudges of rouge. He saw her, the Duchess, slip into the cellar with her mask askew, her laughter echoing off the stone. He saw him, the bishop's man, trailing behind, head bent, hands fidgeting with his crucifix. But he says nothing. Not yet. He knows these stories are worth more than a handful of coppers if you hold them long enough. Imagine the maids, skirts hitched up as they scrub the rushes from the chamber floors the morning after. They find the evidence, ribbons caught in the straw, a ring pressed into the corner where two bodies must have tangled like roots beneath a tree. One girl, no older than 16, picks up a pearl earring and slips it into her apron pocket, a secret token she will run her thumb over when she's lying awake in her pallet, imagining the lives she'll never live. And the laundry women, oh, they see it all. Imagine them wringing out soiled sheets in icy water, the cloth heavy and rank with sweat and candle grease. They see the stains, the tears where delicate stitching came undone in a moment of urgent grasping. Sometimes they see more, little drops of blood, a bruise-shaped shadow that tells a story the lady will deny if asked. The women lean close over the wash buckets, their voices low, cracked with wonder and disgust all at once. But it's not only what they see, it's what they hear. Because stone walls echo, don't they? And servants slip where they shouldn't, behind tapestries, through hidden doors built long before the current lord took the throne. They press their ears to the panels and hear the soft rush of breath, the stifled giggles, the sharp slap of a palm on skin, the hiss of a name uttered like a prayer. Some servants are brave enough to barter their knowledge. Picture the steward's assistant, clever fingers, sharper mind, who keeps a little ledger tucked inside a flour sack in the pantry. No names, of course, only symbols. A fox for the sly ones, a rose for the lovers, a cross for the bishop's men. Each mark is a debt, each debt a promise that one day someone will pay him to keep a mouth shut or to open it at exactly the right moment. And yet, not all secrets stay safely hidden. Imagine the stable boy, sweet-faced, too curious for his own good, who boasts to the wrong drinking companion at the village inn. His tongue, loose from cider, spills a name, a place, a mask that slipped. By sunrise, he's dragged back behind the kitchens, his cheek bruised, his lips split. He'll learn, or he won't last the winter. It wasn't all cold calculation, though. Sometimes, the servants envied what they saw. Imagine the chambermaid, pressing her palm flat against the closed door, listening to the laughter that trickles out like warm honey. She's seen the lady slip out hours later, hair tangled, skin flushed, lips bitten raw. She wonders what it might feel like to step into that room instead of waiting behind it, to wear a mask of her own, to cast off her rough-spun apron for a silken shift. Some did. Sometimes the line blurred. A page boy invited in for a jest. A maid pulled into the swirl of limbs and candlelight, promised a gold coin if she told no one. But afterward, when she returns to her tiny cot in the corner of the laundry, the hush that follows tastes different, sharper, heavier, as if the secret is too big for a small body to hold. And then there were the older ones, the cook, the butler, the steward's wife, the ones who knew that knowing too much was a dangerous gift. They moved like ghosts through the halls, eyes downcast, ears sharp. They gathered the gossip like dry kindling, stored it somewhere safe in their memory until the day they'd need to spark a fire, to protect their own, to barter a future for their children, to keep their place when a younger, hungrier servant threatened to slip into their shoes. So, picture them as you lie there in your bed, warm and safe while they scuttle through the cold stone corridors, feet whispering against ancient flagstones. Imagine the hush in the scullery at dawn, the muffled giggles that dissolve into careful silence when the door creaks open. They hold your secrets, these invisible watchers. Press them into the folds of their aprons. Tuck them into the hems of their tunics. Carry them back to cramped chambers where they will dream of the sins they clean from the floorboards. Rest your head now and listen. The servants know more than the lords ever will. And they're not done whispering yet. Next, we'll drift to where music swells and murmurs fill the secret venues. The soundtrack to all these tangled bodies and honeyed lies. But for now, stay here in the hush of the after while the servants sweep the rushes and fold your secrets away for another night. Next, let's slip deeper into that warmth where all those secrets settle, like candle wax pooling on cold stone. Imagine you're standing just inside the doorway of that secret chamber, the hush of velvet curtains at your back, the flicker of torchlight trembling across your face. And then you hear it, the first delicate hum of music, so soft it feels like a breath against your ear. Because every night like this needed a soundtrack, something to drown out the shivers of guilt, to bind together all the rustling silk and whispered lies. Music, after all, is an accomplice. It forgives what the tongue dares not name and gives rhythm to sins that might otherwise taste too bitter in the dark. Picture this, a slender figure perched on a low stool near the hearth, lute resting in their lap, fingers plucking strings worn smooth by endless ballads. The notes drift into the rafters like smoke, thin, curling, impossible to catch. They slip between shoulders hunched close in conspiratorial huddles, over the backs of chairs draped in fur, under the heavy drape of brocade that shields the world outside from the hum inside. There's laughter, too, not the boisterous roar of the feasting hall above, but a softer sound, threaded with promise and something a little reckless. A giggle swallowed into a goblet of spiced wine, the hush that follows when two glances meet across a candle's flickering flame. The music fills the spaces in between, a warm balm to soothe the stings of guilt and the sting of a careless word that might ruin it all. Imagine the melodies they chose. Some were old folk tunes, stories of lovers tangled under moonlit trees, shepherd girls with flowers in their hair, Knights who forgot their oaths when faced with bare skin and a secret smile. Others were slyer, new compositions created just for these gatherings. Riddles woven into notes so that every chord carried a double meaning. If you knew, you knew. If you didn't, well, the tune was pretty enough to hide your ignorance. And it wasn't always just lutes. Sometimes a flute joined in, a reedy little sigh of sound that made the hair on your neck stand up. Or a harp, strings trembling under nimble fingers while its soft echo chased itself around the cold stones. When the mood lifted, when wine loosened the tongue and desire flickered bright as torchlight, a drum might thud softly in the corner, each beat like a heartbeat reminding you, yes, you're alive. You're here. Don't stop now. Now, imagine the sounds layered on top of this. The rustle of silk slipping from shoulder. The gentle clink of rings dropped onto a table. Precious tokens traded for a kiss or a promise that will never survive the dawn. The low murmur of confessions, half true and wholly dangerous. Shared mouth to ear, so quietly you almost doubt they were spoken at all. Picture a woman leaning back against a tapestry that smells faintly of smoke and old lavender. She laughs, head thrown back, a golden curl escaping her mask. Beside her, a man traces a line along her collarbone, a line so faint it's lost in the shadows as quickly as it appears. They don't look at the musician, but the song is there, stitching them together like an invisible thread. And not everyone in the room plays the same game. Some sit alone, wine untouched, eyes glassy as they drift through memories too heavy for the warmth of the fire. Some press so close you can't tell where one voice ends and another begins. Murmurs become moans, soft gasps swallowed by the melody until they sound like just another instrument. A flute made of breath and trembling lips. Picture the way the music lingers in the air long after the last string is plucked. The way it sticks to your skin, heavy with the scent of spiced wine, rose oil, sweat, and the faint tang of beeswax candles burning low. When a lutenist finally rests their hands, the hush that follows is not empty but charged, full of things left unsaid, bodies half tangled, masks ask you, eyes shining in the half-dark. Sometimes the murmurs turn sharp. A lover's quarrel, a jealous hiss when a glance lingered too long on someone else's bare shoulder. Words spat out like venom, swallowed down again when the music rose, forgiving, coaxing, reminding everyone why they were here in the first place. No shame tonight. Only bodies, only secrets, only the steady hum of song covering the cost of every sin. And when the night deepened, when the last embers in the hearth sighed into ash, the murmurs softened too. Whispers turned into slow, sleepy promises never meant to see daylight. A cloak draped over shoulders, a ring slipped back onto a finger. Someone hums the last line of the ballad under their breath, carrying it out into the cold passageway, a charm against the harsh scrape of morning. So rest your head now, hear the warm dark, hear that faint echo of a lute string vibrating against your chest. Let the murmurs drift across your pillow like a lover's sigh. Next, we'll slip closer to the hidden rules that held all this together, the strange bargains and subtle boundaries that turned chaos into ritual. But for now, let the music play one more time in your mind. Let it soothe you as the candle burns low, its wax pooling like secrets too sweet to spill just yet. Next, let's lean in closer, past the soft notes of the lute fading into the stone, past the murmurs, the giggles half swallowed by wine and shadows. Because as reckless and deliciously forbidden as these gatherings were, they didn't swirl into chaos without a kind of hidden order. Even sin, you see, craves its own rules, secret ones, whispered from mouth to mouth, binding even the boldest hearts to a fragile truce. Picture this. A candle flickers low on a heavy oak table, its pool of wax catching a lock of stray hair from the lady leaning over it. She laughs as she listens to a rule repeated for the 100th time. No names spoken here that don't belong to the night. It's the first law of the room, the one that keeps masks firmly tied. If you dare whisper someone's true title, Duke, Countess, Bishop, you risk more than scorn. You risk being exiled from the warmth back to the drafty corridors. Your secret's no longer shielded by the hush of velvet. Imagine the enforcers of these rules. Not the guards you see at the gate, but sly-eyed guests who watch from the shadows. A cup of wine balanced lazily in one hand. If they hear you speak too freely, they might glide up behind you, a soft hand at your elbow, their breath warm as they remind you. Careful, darling. Tongues that wag too wildly don't always stay in mouths. A jest, yes, but the way their eyes linger on yours makes you swallow your next word before it takes shape. Then there are the bargains. Because pleasure here was not free. Oh no. Every touch, every stolen glance came wrapped in little unspoken debts. A lady might promise a favor in exchange for the slip of a mask, the reveal of a scar or secret tattoo hidden beneath lace. A knight might barter a whispered vow of protection on the battlefield for a glimpse beneath the silk robe of a rival's lover. Each trade a stitch in the tapestry that bound them all together, tight enough to thrill, loose enough to unravel at the slightest tug. And yet, these strange rules created a kind of safety too. Don't bite too hard. Don't draw blood where others can see. Don't leave bruises that husbands or wives must explain away at breakfast. Such gentle warnings, woven into the soft hush of the room, were as vital as the locks on the chamber doors. No one wanted to wake to a scandal that could not be drowned in gossip or smoothed over with coin. Imagine the gestures, how a nod across the cushions could mean join us, or a turned shoulder could mean not tonight, not you. Consent, that word we think of as so modern, whispered in candlelight centuries ago, enforced by a flick of a wrist, a raised brow, a glove slipped back onto a hand to say this is where I end. Some nights, the rules went further still. A lord might declare a game. No one unmasks until the final candle burns out, or each must share a secret darker than the last before lips can touch. They played these cruel games because power, when tangled with desire, tastes sharper than any blade. But break the game, and you'd find yourself shunned, a wallflower in a room built for shadows and heat, your goblet left empty while laughter drifted past you like smoke you could never catch. Picture the punishments, too, gentle and wicked all at once. A guest who spoke out of turn might be made to stand at the edge of the chamber, mask off for all to see, their shame pinned to their skin like embroidery. Another who lied about a secret might find their next invitation lost in the shuffle of messages slipped under doors. No note, no velvet scrap wrapped in a ring of ribbon, just silence, colder than the wind howling through the battlements. Sometimes the rules slipped. Wine sloshed too freely. Someone dared too much, said a name too loudly, tore a lace collar that couldn't be stitched back before dawn. And then the hush that fell was not soft but brittle. Eyes darted to the corners, to the servants pressing close to the walls, ears sharp as blades. The steward might step forward, a hand lifted, voice low but clear. This is no place for fools who forget why these walls stay standing. And just like that, the mask of revelry slipped back on. The laughter forced, the touches more cautious, the shadows a little heavier. And yet, these rules, these whispered commandments, were part of the thrill, weren't they? Imagine lying there now, your blanket tucked under your chin, your mind drifting toward the candlelit corners of that hidden room. You can almost hear the giggles when the steward recites the rules like a priest reading commandments meant only for the flesh. The little promises not to break each other in ways that can't be mended by morning. The unspoken truth that everyone here is both prisoner and warden, bound by silk knots and secrets they pray will never slip. So rest your eyes. Let the hush of those old, crumbling rules settle around you like a second blanket. The kind that keeps you warm, but also keeps you wondering what it would feel like to break them just once. Next, we'll wander toward the masks and mirrors, those tricksters that turn shadows into illusions, reflections into forbidden dreams. But for now, breathe deep. You're safe here, wrapped in rules older than crowns, older than sin itself. Rules written in candlelight and broken with a single kiss. Next, lean in closer, because now we find ourselves at one of the most delicious tricks of these hidden halls, the masks and the mirrors. Strange, isn't it? How a single scrap of silk, a strip of leather tied behind your ears, could turn a noble into a phantom, a lover into a stranger, a sin into something you might just blame on shadows by morning. Picture this. The hush of a stone chamber where the only light comes from guttering candles, their flames throwing wild shapes on ancient walls. Near the hearth, laughter bubbles like wine in a goblet, sweet, sticky, and a little too sharp to taste without flinching. But you don't look at the flames. You look at the masks. Imagine a woman stepping into the glow, a mask of black velvet, feathers curling high above her brow, tiny beads stitched into the cloth to catch each flicker of light. The rest of her face is pale and warm, lips painted dark like ripe berries about to burst. Behind that mask, her eyes glitter, all question and dare. Masks made it all bearable, you see. Behind a mask, a bishop's favorite son might slip to his knees before a rival's wife, hands trembling at the hem of her robe. Behind a mask, a lady with a saint's reputation by daylight could arch her back in a corner strewn with furs, her giggle hidden behind a delicate scrap of lace. It wasn't just the protection, it was the freedom. A mask meant you could say what you'd never dare to confess at breakfast. You could touch what you'd never let your hands linger on when the sun glowed through the chapel's stained glass. When your name was hidden, your body could speak for you. And sometimes, your body spoke so fluently that it left bruises that would bloom under collars and sleeve for days to come. Now, picture the mirrors. Oh, the mirrors. Some chambers kept them in dusty corners, small and battered, more bronze than glass. Others, wealthier hosts, carried great polished slabs from Venice, silver-backed, so smooth they caught not just your face, but the entire swirl of sin that wrapped around you. Imagine leaning close, a flush rising to your cheeks as you catch your own reflection. Your mask stares back, the silk ribbons loose, a strand of hair escaping across your brow. Behind you, flickers of movement, a hand brushing a hip, a bare shoulder revealed for an instant before a curtain sways and hides it again. Picture a knight, broad shoulders, a mask carved to look like a lion's face, mane curling in painted gold leaf. He stands before the mirror, watching himself with a fascination almost more intimate than the touch of the woman at his side. Her gloved hands slip the mask higher on his forehead, just enough that their eyes meet in the glass. And what they see there is not him, not her, but something older, something half true and half fantasy, reflected and refracted until it no longer matters what they'd confess if pressed to the altar steps tomorrow. The irony, of course, was that the masks never really hid the truth. If anything, they revealed it. You could lie with your lips, but not with your eyes. You could cover your name, but not your gasp when fingertips brushed a place they shouldn't. Some said the mirrors made it worse. that when you saw yourself tangled in shadows and sin, you couldn't pretend you were anything less than exactly what you were in that moment. Human, hungry, half ruined by your own desire. Sometimes people played little games with the mirrors. A masked guest would hold up a candle behind another's shoulder, the flame doubling and tripling in the silver glass. Or they'd press two bodies so close their reflections blurred together, a single shape that flickered with each heartbeat. Lovers dared each other to remove a mask only in front of the glass. "Show me," they'd whisper. "Just for a moment. Let me see who I'm breaking my vow with." And then the mask would slip, the face would appear, flushed, mouth open, pupils wide as the flame, and before it could stick, the silk was tied tight again, name and sin locked away. Servants, too, carried tales of these mirrors. They'd find fingerprints smudged in the silver, candle drips hardened on the frame, scraps of mask ribbons lost in the rushes beneath. Some swore that if you peered too long into a mirror the morning after, you'd see not your own weary face, but a glimpse of the night before, a flicker of a mouth pressed to skin, a flash of teeth catching a scream. Superstition? Perhaps. But in a castle that held so many secrets, who could say for certain? So rest your head now. Feel the hush settle soft against your chest. Imagine the warm press of a mask's edge against your temple. The strange thrill of watching your own eyes darken in flickering candlelight. Picture the mirrors catching every moan, every stifled confession, turning flesh and sin into something half true, half shadow. Next, we'll drift to the feast before the fall. The tables piled high with roast meats and sticky fruits, where pleasure was never just flesh on flesh, but mouth on mouth, taste on taste, sin layered sweet and ripe and ready to spill. But for now, breathe easy. You're safe here behind your mask. Let the mirror hold what it must. Let the shadows keep your secret shape until morning steals it away again. Next, let's wander into the warmth of the great table. The place where temptation always began not with a touch, but with a taste. Because even before masks slipped and silk pooled at ankles, these nights needed a feast, a last supper of sorts, if you like. A chance for guests to sink their teeth into the promise of pleasure before they sank into each other. Picture it. The same cold stone hall that, by daylight, smelled of dust and tallow candles now glows with a golden hush. Tapestries flutter, stirring with every draft like sighs escaping the walls themselves. The air is thick with smoke from the hearth, the scent of roasted meat sweet and heavy, mingling with cloves, cinnamon, and the faint tang of spilled wine soaking into ancient rushes underfoot. The table groans beneath the weight of it all. Silver platters shine under candlelight, stacked with pheasants roasted until their skin is crisp and glistening with drippings. There's boar, its hide seared and crackling. The juice is running onto the carving board as a servant slices slabs of pink flesh. Trays of bread still warm from the oven, rough loaves torn by hand, steam curling up like a promise you can taste on your tongue before you even bite. And the fruit. The fruit. The real danger here. Imagine a platter heaped with figs split open, their insides glistening like rubies. Pears so ripe they bruise at the touch of a fingertip. Grapes, deep purple and slick with their own sweetness, ready to burst when bitten. The wine is everywhere. Pitchers balanced between half-drained goblets, stains blooming like blood on linen napkins. And all around the table, the guests lean in, their laughter sticky, hands brushing in secret while they tear meat from bone and let juice run down their wrists. Picture the lady with a mask of silk and tiny silver bells stitched along the edge. She lifts a fig to her lips, teeth sinking into the soft flesh. It drips down her chin, so she laughs, wipes it away with the back of her hand, only to find her fingers caught in someone else's grip. He brings her hand to his mouth, licks the sweetness from her skin as if he's sampling the fruit itself. A bite before the bite. Servants weave through it all, carrying platters high above bowed heads. They pretend not to see the hand slipped under the table, the foot that nudges a shin until its owner shivers and nearly drops their goblet. Somewhere near the hearth, a young minstrel plucks at a lute, his melody lost beneath the hum of voices, the squeal of a knife slipping through roast fowl. Every so often, a guest will toss him a bone, a wink, a scrap of gossip he'll trade for a few coins in the kitchen at dawn. Imagine the heat of the room now, bodies pressed shoulder to shoulder, wine fogging the mind, sweat beating at temples. Candle wax drips onto the table, hardens on silver trays. A lord leans in to whisper a joke, but the lady beside him doesn't laugh. Her mouth is too busy licking the sticky flesh from her fingertips. She feels eyes on her. That's part of the game, after all. The feast is not just to feed the belly, but to whet the appetite for what comes next. There are rules here, too, though no one dares speak them aloud. You eat only what you can savor. You drink only until your tongue loosens, not so much that your secrets slur into the wrong ears. You laugh, but not so loud you drown out the low, conspiratorial murmurs of who might follow whom behind a tapestry when the platters are empty. Sometimes these feasts turn careless. A goblet knocked over, wine trickling onto the rushes like a tiny river of sin that no servant can quite mop away. A nobleman boasting too loudly about a conquest, his voice breaking the fragile hush and drawing narrowed eyes from across the table. But always, the music and the murmurs soften the edges again. A fig pressed to parted lips. A cherry slipped between teeth, not your own. A promise made with a bite, sealed with a drop of wine traced along a collarbone when no one's looking or when everyone is. Picture the aftermath. The platters picked clean, bones piled in gleaming heaps, fruit skins curling on silver plates like spent lovers. The candles have burned low, dripping stubs that flicker each time the wind sighs through the drafty halls. And now, the guests push back their chairs. The laughter dims to a hum, the kind that shivers through your bones and makes your fingertips tingle. They stand, some steady, some already swaying, faces half hidden behind their masks. There is a hush, a charged pause. This is the breath before the plunge. The moment when the gluttony of the feast slips from their mouths to their skin, when hands that tore bread now trace silk ribbons at another's throat, when the sweetness of pear and fig is replaced by the salt of sweat, the wine turned to heat humming low in the belly. So, here you are now, lying beneath your blanket, safe while the embers of that imagined fire still glow in your mind. Can you smell the roasted meat? The wine-soaked rushes? Can you feel the stickiness on your fingertips, the laughter caught in your throat? Next, we'll follow the hush that spills out once the feast is done, the secrets that slip like wine between careless lips, the whispers that could break necks as easily as they broke vows. But for now, rest. Lick the last taste of that sweet fruit from your dreams. Let the hush of the feast before the fall rock you deeper into the shadows. There's so much more to taste in the dark. Next, let's drift into the hush that seeps in once the feast is done. When the platters are scraped clean, the goblets drained down to their dregs, and the heat of roasted meats and spiced wine softens every tongue. Because if there was one thing more dangerous than what happened behind closed doors at these forbidden gatherings, it was what spilled out when those same doors swung open again. Picture it. The hush of the great chamber now punctured by the faint giggle of a lady stumbling down a narrow corridor, her mask half hanging from one ear. She doesn't mean to laugh so loudly, but the wine bubbles through her like secrets desperate to be known. Her companion, a man whose cloak is misbuttoned, whose hand still trembles from where it rested on her thigh moments ago, hushes her with a finger to her lips. But it's too late. Words already hover in the air like mist waiting for dawn to burn them clean. Imagine the corners of these grand old castles, the cold stone staircases, the alcoves behind moth-eaten tapestries, places where secrets cling like dust. A young squire, face flushed from sneaking an extra goblet, stumbles upon a pair of nobles, still locked together in a kiss so deep it tastes more of spilled wine than affection. He sees their faces. He hears a name slip out, a name that should never have left the bedroom, let alone the lips of the queen's cousin. He tucks it away, that tiny slip pressing it like a coin into the pocket of his ragged cloak. Because secrets were worth gold, or power, or revenge, if your hands were steady enough to hold them. A careless giggle behind a tapestry could undo a marriage. A drunken boast by the hearth could place a dagger in your ribs come dawn. Picture the way the gossip slithered through the keep. A stable boy overhears a lady's maid confessing to a friend. I saw the ring she dropped. He gave it to her while his wife danced upstairs. The maid laughs, careless, certain her whispers will die in the laundry where only soap and boiling water will listen. But by morning, the cook boy knows. By noon, the steward's clerk knows. And by dusk, the bishop's man arrives with a polite, heavy purse to buy the truth. Or bury it. And yet, there was a thrill to spilling a secret, wasn't there? Imagine the chambermaid who holds her breath behind the drapery, pressing a hand to her mouth to stifle her gasp as two masked figures tangle on the window seat. She runs back to her cot, cheeks flushed, the secret burning so hot inside her she must whisper it to someone, anyone, before it scalds her tongue. One word turns into two into 20, and by the time the lady she serves rises for mass, half the servants know where her mistress's pearls were last night and who unfastened them. The nobles themselves were no better. Some secrets were slipped like favors. A hush of blackmail wrapped in silk ribbons. I know what you did, but I will keep your mask tied tight for now. Others used their confessions like currency. Imagine a lord, lips stained deep with wine, leaning close across a cushion to confess the name of the night he met in the dark. A lady, cheeks flushed and eyes wide behind her mask, files it away, a debt to be called upon when she finds herself cornered by scandal or ruin. And of course, there were secrets that cost more than gold. Some cost blood. Picture the steward who knows too much, found face down in the well before he can carry his knowledge to another house. Or the maid who overhears a plan that could topple a duke. A single slip of tongue, and she is banished to a nunnery, her lips sealed behind iron gates for the rest of her days. Sometimes the secrets were so petty they were sweet. Who kissed whom behind the tapestry? Who left a ribbon tangled in the rushes? Sometimes they were so monstrous they made the walls shudder, which masked a prince whose heirs would never be born of his wife's bed. But the castle never cared, did it? The walls heard all. The thick stones, the heavy beams blackened with smoke. They drank in each confession, each careless whisper, each drunken slip. And they held them close, like a miser counting coins in the dark. So, here you are, warm in your blankets, eyelids heavy, listening to the echo of all those secrets that once dripped like wine down these ancient walls. Can you hear them? The giggle that slipped through a crack in the door. The soft hush of a promise made in a cellar that never saw the sun. The ragged breath of a lover who whispered a name they should have buried deeper than the grave. Next, we'll drift to where the church turned its gaze aside. The priests and bishops who heard confessions by day and took bribes by night, who prayed over souls they secretly envied. But for now, hush. Rest your head. Let these spilled secrets drip into your dreams like candle wax. warm and a little dangerous, pooling around your mind until they harden into stories you'll carry when morning comes. And don't worry, the walls remember them for you. They always do. Next, slip deeper with me into the soft, candlelit shadows where sin and sanctity danced such an uneasy waltz. Because for all the rules the church declared, for all the threats of damnation, the warnings of fire and brimstone, the sermons thundered down from cold pulpits, there was always a door left conveniently ajar, a hush where the holy men turned their gaze elsewhere or pretended not to see at all. Picture it, a stone chapel tucked into the belly of a fortress, its small altar stained dark from centuries of trembling prayers. Stained glass windows filter the weak moonlight into patches of blue and crimson on the flagstones. In the pews, someone kneels, head bowed, but not in the posture of a pure heart. No, this kneeling comes with a bargain whispered against cold wood, an oath to look the other way when the candles flicker too bright behind the Lord's locked doors. Because the church, for all its banners and bells, was built on coin as much as faith. And these orgies, these secret revels wrapped in silk and masks, fed more than just fleshly hunger. They lined purses, stocked larders, paid for new robes and golden chalices that glowed like forgiveness in the dark. Imagine the bishop's man, his boots soft on the stone floor, his rings clinking as he lifts a cup of strong wine at the Lord's table. He listens to the laughter that drifts through a hidden passage, the sighs and giggles that ripple through the walls like a hush of ghosts. He closes his eyes. He does not pray. He counts instead. The coins slipped into his palm, the favors promised by trembling lips that, come Sunday, will speak hallelujah with such trembling piety you'd think their bodies never knew the taste of sin. Picture the confessional, that small wooden box with its tiny grate. A woman kneels, veil pulled low over flushed cheeks, the scent of rose oil clinging to her skin. Her voice, when it comes, is just a sigh. Forgive me, Father, for I have sinned. And the priest, his ear pressed close, breathes in the smell of wine and silk and something deeper, older, rawer than any holy vow. He mumbles a penance. He does not look in her eyes. He cannot, because he knows tonight, when the bells toll midnight, he will walk the same dark corridors she slipped through, only this time without his cassock. They were not all so corrupt, of course. Some truly tried. Imagine the young priest, pale, thin, fresh from the seminary, who gasps when he hears the rumors drifting through the servant halls. He clutches his rosary until the beads bite into his palm, whispering psalms in the hope that the words will drown out the moans that echo up the stairwell. But when dawn comes, and he must stand before the Lord whose gold keeps the church roof from leaking, he says nothing. He bows his head. He blesses the bread that was bought with sin. And then there were the cunning ones, the sly confessors who collected sins like pearls on a string. Imagine a bishop at a great feast, robe hem trailing through spilled wine as he leans close to a masked figure, eyes glittering behind hooded lids. He knows who met whom behind the tapestry. He knows whose heir is not truly theirs. He knows, and for this knowledge, he demands more gold, more land, more power. After all, salvation is expensive, and a well-fed priest can pray harder than one who goes hungry, or so the saying went in these shadowed halls. Sometimes the church threatened excommunication, brandished its heavy words like a blade. A scandal too loud, a rumor too widespread, and a public confession would be demanded. Picture it, a lord on his knees in the chapel, forehead pressed to the cold stone while the bishop drones a sermon about lust and ruin. Outside, the peasants gather, whispering to each other. But they know, just as the bishop knows, that next month the same Lord's gold will be slipped back into the church's coffers, and the same sin will flicker behind heavy doors before the moon can wane twice. And always the people watched, the ones who worked the land, who toiled so that bread and wine could appear on tables piled high. Imagine the village women, their hands raw from the winter wash, whispering in the candlelit hush of their cottages. Did you hear? They say the priest blesses the very bed where the countess lost her virtue. The words are half envy, half disgust, but when they kneel to pray, they pray to the same God, hoping their simple sins are small enough to be ignored in all this heavy, perfumed rot. Not all holy men gave in, of course. A few, burned by conscience, fled into the woods, their prayers shouted to the trees where no ears but the crows could judge them. Some were silenced, quietly, efficiently, before their confessions could become the ruin of too many powerful names. A monk's grave hidden in the garden, unmarked, blanketed by winter's first snow. So here we are, you and I, lying in the hush of this late hour, listening to the way the holy and the profane curled together like lovers who could not stay apart. Can you hear the echo of old psalms whispered between kisses? The hush of feet slipping over the chapel floor to kneel before a candle, praying not for forgiveness, but for the next secret door to open. Rest your eyes. Feel the warmth of your blankets settle around you like the heavy velvet robes that trailed through those corridors centuries ago. Next, we'll drift toward betrayal. The night when the hush of pleasure turned sharp as a blade, when a lover's whisper cracked open like a trapdoor. But for now, stay here in this quiet place where holy men counted coin by candlelight, and the church door stayed just a little ajar, for sin to slip in and secrets to slip out. Next, follow me into the darkest corner of these secret halls, where silk and sweet wine could not protect even the cleverest hearts. Because every hush, every stolen kiss, every promise murmured behind a mask was one slip away from ruin, and ruin, when it came, rarely arrived at the tip of a sword. More often, it crept in on a lover's tongue. Picture this: a stone chamber still warm with the breath of a feast now long gone cold. The embers in the hearth glow soft and orange, shadows dancing on the walls like memories that refuse to settle. In the middle of that hush, a man and a woman stand too close, the smell of wine on their lips, their masks hanging loose around their necks like trophies they forgot to hide. She leans in, voice trembling not with fear, but with delight. The thrill of confessing something no one else knows. "I will keep you close," she whispers, her fingers pressed to the pulse in his throat. "You are mine now. You'll never breathe a word." But he does. Oh, he does. Because secrets pressed between warm bodies are never safe for long. Imagine him the next morning, boots crunching on frost-bitten gravel as he stumbles from the side passage. His cloak is on backwards, the hem muddy where he knelt at her feet. In his pocket, the token she pressed into his palm, a ring that once belonged to her husband's grandmother, stolen from a casket of heirlooms meant for more respectable hands. He tells himself he won't speak of it, but the wine still hums in his blood, and the rush of her touch burns like a fever he cannot sweat out. By the time the sun has crept over the parapets, he is seated beside another, a rival, a friend, a snake with kind eyes, and the secret slips free like a single drop of poison in a goblet already half empty. The betrayal starts small, a whisper traded for a debt forgiven. Did you know? The rival leans back, fingers drumming on the table, a smirk tucked beneath his mustache. They say she gave him the ring, and more. The words roll like dice across a tavern floor, impossible to gather once they scatter. And so it spreads. Picture the lady that afternoon, her hair brushed smooth, her cheeks cool from rosewater dabbed by her loyal maid. She does not know yet. She hums to herself while the steward bows, bringing letters for her to read by the window's weak winter light. Her fingertips still remember where he held her wrist, his mouth trembling with the weight of their bargain. She thinks he will never tell. She thinks I am safe. But the walls, the floors, the servants who carry scraps of gossip like coals smoldering under their tongues, they know otherwise. Somewhere in the courtyard, the stable boy is already repeating the story to a girl who traded him an apple for his trouble. Somewhere in the kitchens, the cook's ladle dips slower into the stew as she listens to the rumor slip between the maid's soft giggles. Betrayal, you see, never stays in the bed where it's born. It crawls under doors, slides down flagstones slick with the drip of wine, curls around ears that should never have heard. And what happens next is never as simple as a broken heart. No, the heart is the first thing to go. What follows is the real cost. Imagine the lady's husband, a man too clever by half, standing in the cold corridor outside their chambers. He watches her laugh with her maid, her lips soft around words she does not know have already doomed her. He fingers the hilt of his dagger, feels its cold bite through the fine leather of his gloves. He does not rush in. He does not shout. He simply watches, listens, learns every line of her face so that when he must carve her memory from his mind, he can do it cleanly. Sometimes betrayal ended in a hush. A slip of poison poured into wine goblets meant for two. A hunt that went wrong in the deep woods where the trees closed their arms around the final, stifled scream. Or the quiet, polite visit from a bishop's man who offered forgiveness in one hand and a noose in the other. Confess, he would say, voice gentle as butter melting on bread. God is merciful, but the mercy was never for the one who had broken the vow. Picture, too, the ones left behind. The maid who must gather the lady's gowns from the floor, her fingers trembling as she folds silk that still smells faintly of lavender and sin. The stable boy who finds the ring, half buried where boots have trampled it into the mud behind the stables. He pockets it, the metal cold against his skin, a trinket for luck, or maybe a curse he will carry to his grave. And through it all, the castle watches. Stones older than any crown, beams darkened by centuries of smoke and secrets. It has seen betrayals more wicked than this one, yet it holds each new story like a jewel pressed into the cracks of its walls. The next gathering will come. New masks will hide familiar faces. New whispers will slide from lips that promise I will never tell. But they always do. That is the human way. Hearts too soft to hold sharp secrets. Tongues too quick to taste the sweetness of revenge. So rest your eyes now. Feel the weight of your blanket press around you like the hush of ancient stones that have seen too many lies wrapped in silk and candlelight. Next, we'll wander into the rumor of a queen who wore her mask more cleverly than any of them, who slipped into disguises so complete even her crown could not betray her. But for now, breathe. Let the betrayal slip from your mind like a ring lost in the mud. Here, in this quiet dark, you are safe, far from lips that whisper and blades that wait. Next, let's drift from cold corridors and bitter betrayals to something stranger still. The story of a crown too heavy to keep its secrets safe and a queen too clever to let her mask slip. Because hidden behind these stone walls, where sin tangled with silk and shadows, they say there was once a night when even the throne itself wore disguise. Picture it, a great castle perched above a frozen river, its turrets piercing the mist like spears pointed at the heavens. The court gathers inside, warm fires crackling, laughter weaving through the feasting hall where nobles toast to the queen's good health. Each sip a small prayer she never hears. But she is not there. Not yet. Somewhere beyond the great hall, She is busy tying a mask behind her pale neck, pulling on a cloak stitched with fur so fine it drinks in the torchlight. Imagine her ladies-in-waiting hovering like startled birds, begging her not to go. Majesty, it is beneath you. Majesty, your reputation. But her smile is sly, the sort that never quite reaches her eyes, and she lifts one gloved finger to her lips. Hush, she says. A crown is just a prettier cage. Tonight, I want to know the taste of the air outside its bars. They say she slipped through the servants' passage, her cloak brushing against the rough stone so the hem caught tiny specks of dust no other royal garment would dare wear. Picture her footsteps echoing softly down to the stables. Boots, not slippers tonight, heels scuffed and sturdy. A stable boy bows low, trembling as he lifts a lantern to her face, but the mask hides her well. He sees only another lady of the court, flush with wine and mischief. She presses a coin into his palm, and he looks away as she mounts a bay mare, its breath steaming in the cold like a promise not to be kept. They say she rode to the edge of the woods, where a small hunting lodge waited, a place where the rules loosened like silk laces after dusk. Here, candles flickered behind shuttered windows. Here, laughter drifted through the trees, low and wicked, and no one asked who you were if you wore your mask well. Picture the hush that fell when she stepped inside. The crackle of fire, the smell of pine logs burning, the sweetness of mulled wine thick on the air. Nobles sprawled on fur throws, masks bright with gold leaf and tiny gems. They looked up at her, saw only a stranger, her mask a fox's face, eyes glinting from the shadows. She felt their gazes brush her skin, but none recognized the weight beneath her cloak. The weight of a crown left behind, but never truly gone. And so, the queen moved through the room like smoke. She dipped her gloved fingers into a goblet offered by a man too deep in his cups to guess her name. She laughed when a lady in a swan feather mask tugged her down onto a cushion, silk skirts pooling together like a secret river. She let them believe she was just another rumor. A noble's bored wife, perhaps. A foreign envoy's daughter. No one important. Exactly what she wanted. Outside, the wind rattled the shutters, but inside the hush grew heavy with the sound of bodies pressing close. Hands sliding under cloaks, breath misting the cold glass of the windows. Somewhere, a lute hummed a song of summer, though winter clung to every branch just beyond the door. She listened to the music, to the moans half hidden beneath it, to the whispers of names that would burn kingdoms to the ground if they ever found their way back to court. But here's the strangest part. They say she did not touch. Not that night. She watched. She let the warmth of the room soak into her bones. She let her gloved fingers trail along an arm here, a throat there, a mask slipping slightly askew to reveal a mouth she would never kiss. For her, the thrill was not in the taste, but in the power of seeing and not being seen. The queen who ruled with words by daylight ruled with silence that night. Imagine how the rumors bloomed. A week later, a ring left behind in the hunting lodge, too fine, too royal, traced with a family crest barely etched inside the band. A stable boy found it under a fur throw and carried it to the steward, palms sweating. The steward, clever enough to stay alive, tucked it away in a small box lined with velvet scraps and locked it tight. When the queen summoned him later that winter, her face all marble and steel once more, he returned it with a bow so deep his knees cracked. "Did you see anything?" she asked, voice cool as the frost creeping up the window panes. He shook his head. "Nothing, Majesty. Nothing but shadows and laughter in the woods." She smiled then, a ghost of the fox behind her eyes. And that was enough. Some swore she did it again and again. That whenever the court grew too stiff, too heavy with conspiracies and secrets that threatened to choke her, She would slip into her cloak, tie her mask tight, and vanish down corridors older than her own name. Out into the hush where no one bowed, no one begged, and no one knew they were bending a knee all the same. So rest now, here in the hush of your room. Feel the warmth of your blanket, the soft press of the pillow against your cheek, the distant echo of hooves crunching frost outside a stable door. Imagine a queen, unmasked and alone for just one night, her secrets tucked safe under fur and silk. Next, we'll wander to the edge of these castle walls, to the peasants and field hands who spun their own revels under the wild stars, far from crowns and velvet masks. But for now, let the fox slip through the trees in your dreams, clever enough to hide, free enough to stay lost until dawn. Next, slip out with me, away from the cold halls and velvet masks, through the creaking gates of the keep, and into the fields where the wind hums through winter branches like an old song. Because for every candlelit chamber where silk rustled and secrets were sold, there were 100 quiet corners of the countryside where peasants spun their own versions of warmth. Rougher, raw, stripped of lace and velvet, but thrumming with the same hunger that pulsed behind noble doors. Picture it, a village clearing at the edge of a great forest, the moon high above like a watchful silver coin, half hidden by drifting clouds. The peasants gather around a bonfire piled high, with branches scavenged from the Lord's forest. A small theft, a whispered dare that makes the flames feel warmer than they are. Sparks whirl up, caught by the wind, tiny stars born and snuffed in the same breath. Here, there are no masks. Or perhaps every face is its own mask. A mother's weary eyes, a field hand's cracked grin, a shepherd girl's braids loose down her back when she thinks no one's looking. No invitations wrapped in velvet here. No coded symbols pressed into palms. Just word of mouth, passed from neighbor to neighbor as the sun slipped below the hedgerows. Meet at the clearing when the sky turns black. Bring what you can, a jug of mead, an old fiddle, a heart that needs warming. The fire hums in the center, and the villagers hum around it. Someone scrapes a bow across the strings of a battered fiddle, coaxing out a tune older than the stone walls of the castle that looms miles away. Boots stamp the earth in rhythm, skirts swirl, laughter spills from cracked lips turned bright with cheap wine. Picture the taste of it. Not goblets brimming with spiced vintage, but rough clay cups of mead, tart and sticky, dripping down chins. Not silver platters stacked with figs and roasted pheasant, but a crust of bread torn and passed from hand to hand, an apple split with a knife that has gutted pigs and harvested wheat in the same season. And yet, somehow it is sweeter. No etiquette here, no anxious glance over the shoulder for a bishop's man lurking by the fire. Only the hush of trees leaning close, the distant bark of a farm dog tethered too far to come sniff the feast. They dance. Of course they dance. Picture the boys too young for beards, but old enough for mischief, pulling village girls into circles of stomping feet and clapping hands. A widow throws her head back and laughs, hair unpinned, eyes catching the flames gleam like they did when she was 16. A shepherd boy loops a garland of dried flowers around a milkmaid's neck. Not pearls, not gold, but a promise made of crushed petals and the hush of the forest. And when the music slows, the murmurs begin. Not blackmail and bargains, but giggles under a patchy old cloak, the rustle of hay pulled from a nearby cart to soften the ground behind the trees. They know the priest would call it sin. The steward would sneer at such base pleasure, rough as their calloused hands. But out here, under the open sky, there are no stone walls to trap their hunger in shadows. The wind carries their laughter off into the night, where it mingles with the hoot of an owl and the hush of snow beginning to fall. Sometimes they say these gatherings turn wild. A man who drank too deep might bellow a bawdy tune, spinning a girl in circles until she squealed and push him away, breathless with delight and scorn all at once. A brawl might spark, a jealous spark between a plowman and a miller's son. A punch thrown, a lip split, but before dawn they'd be leaning on each other's shoulders, heads tipped together, snoring in the warm lee of the dying fire. And what are the secrets born here? Oh, they were there too. A husband who'd find himself a stranger's wife beneath the boughs of a thorn tree. A girl who'd carry home more than hay in her hair come morning. But there were no tapestries to hide behind, no coins slipped to a steward for silence. Just the hush of the woods, the weight of a secret carried in the belly or buried in the hush of the frost-hard earth. Imagine them at dawn. The embers a soft glow beneath a skin of ash, the smell of burnt wood mixing with damp soil and sweat. They stagger home through lanes still dark, boots soaked through with mud and melted frost. By the time the church bell rings, they kneel on hard pews with smoke still caught in their hair, their lips tasting of mead and the ghost of a kiss traded under the naked branches of an oak tree. So here you are, tucked warm beneath your blankets, listening to the echo of that wild laughter drifting through the hedgerows, carried on the breath of the winter wind. No mass tonight, just faces flushed with wine and wonder, pressed close in the hush between fields and forest. Next, we'll slip to the morning after, when dawn steals the warmth from the hearth, and all the secrets of the night must tiptoe back into daylight, leaving only the scent of smoke and the hush of stories never meant for sunlight. But for now, rest your head. Let the embers of those peasant echoes warm your dreams. And remember, pleasure never cared for stone walls or silk. It needs only a spark, a hush, a willing heart, and the endless, forgiving dark. Next, let's drift to that tender, treacherous hour when night's warmth surrenders to the chill hush of dawn, when the secrets that bloomed like dark flowers behind velvet curtains must tiptoe back into the gray light of day. Because for all the masks and candles and whispered vows, every forbidden gathering ended the same way, with cold breath misting in the corridors, silk and fur pulled tight against shivering skin, and eyes that dared not meet too long in the pale wash of sunrise. Picture it, a castle that hums with the last ghostly echoes of laughter. In the great hall, the long tables stand bare now, crumbs scattered across linen stained with wine the color of old blood. Candlesticks lean like weary sentinels, their wax cooled in thick drips, little white graves for every flame that flickered above sins the priests will never truly absolve. Up in the chambers, the hush is thicker than any fur throw. Imagine the lady who blinks awake beside the hearth, the embers no longer warm enough to soften the chill that has settled in her bones. Her mask lies on the floor, half crushed by a careless boot. Her gown, the one embroidered with tiny pearls she counts when she's afraid, is bundled under her cheek, damp with wine, sweat, and the faint, sharp tang of candle smoke. Beside her, a man snores softly, his face turned away, one bare shoulder streaked with a line of ash, a mark left by a stray ember or a fumbling kiss. It hardly matters now. She watches him for a moment, heart drumming in the cage of her ribs. Not with love, no. With that old, familiar ache. What now? Because in the hush before dawn, fantasy always feels too bright, too raw to wear into daylight. Down the corridor, servants wake before the bells. Their feet hush across icy flagstones, buckets of water sloshing at their sides. They find rooms in every state of abandon. A half-emptied goblet balanced on a window ledge. A single slipper tucked under a bench like a secret trying to stay hidden. A mask drifting face up in a basin of gray, cold water. They move quietly, eyes downcast, their breaths short as they scrub away the evidence. The stickiness of spilt wine, the scatter of rose petals meant to cover the stench of sweat and half-muttered promises. Some guests leave early, long before the first rooster dares clear its throat. Picture a nobleman creeping down a back stair, boots in hand, shirt clutched around his ribs. His hair sticks to his temple, matted with a sheen of oil and the last traces of a lover's perfume. He presses himself flat against a wall when he hears the guard's boots crunch across the courtyard below. The torchlight flickers through an arrow slit, painting his cheek in gold before it slithers away again. For one breathless moment, he wonders if he's still drunk or simply haunted. Then he slips into the stable yard, where his horse waits, stamping the frozen ground. Outside, the frost bites harder than any scornful word spoken over breakfast. The air tastes of wood smoke and regret. Somewhere in the village below, the peasant girl who snuck behind the haystack with a farm boy the night before pulls her shawl tighter as she trudges home, straw clinging to her skirt. The last warmth of his hands fades from her hips. She wonders if he'll nod at her in church or pretend the moonlit hush never happened. Back in the keep, some linger too long. The foolhardy ones, or maybe just the honest ones, stand at the small windows that ring the stone towers, watching the world creep awake. A man leans against the cold sill, eyes tracing the distant curl of smoke from cottages that will never know his name. He rubs a thumb over a fading bite mark at his collarbone, half smiling at the memory already souring in the dawn. There is always a reckoning in the cold light. Lovers rebutton their collars, tug cloaks tight over shoulders that still smell of rose oil and candle wax. They steal glances at each other as they step back into roles they abandoned in the hush of the night. The steward bows stiffly as they pass. He knows what they did. They know he knows. And yet, the bargain holds. Secrets carried under tunics and tucked into the folds of heavy cloaks. Paid for with a nod. A purse slipped silently into a waiting hand. And then, the chapel. Of course, some drift there on unsteady legs, faces still flushed from more than wine. They kneel before cold stone, lips moving through prayers that sound like penance but taste of leftover lust. Imagine the confessor in his stall, eyes bloodshot from too little sleep. He listens to half-spoken sins, doles out easy absolutions, and inside his skull he files each story away. Leverage for another day, another night, another mask. By mid-morning, the castle hums again. The cook's ladle clatters in the pot. The hounds bark at the gates. The guards stamp frost from their boots. From a distance, it could be any morning. Clean, ordinary, respectable. But if you press your ear to the stones, they still hum with what they held a few hours before. The laughter, the moans, the giggles swallowed in the hush behind a locked door. So here you are, safe in your own bed. Listen to that faint echo, that hush of footsteps on stone. Imagine the taste of the air at dawn, the cold bite against your lips, the ghost of warmth that clings to your skin, fleeting as candle smoke. Let it remind you that every sin has its morning, every secret its frost. And yet, somehow the world goes on. The doors close, the rushes are swept clean, and the hush waits for night to fall again. Next, we'll wander into the punishments and pardons that kept these games spinning. The price paid when whispers grew too loud, and the ways even the deepest betrayal could sometimes be bought back with a smile and a coin. But for now, rest. Let the cold dawn fade. Let the secrets slip back into shadow where they belong, until the next hush finds you. Next, lean in, closer still, because now we come to the reckoning, the part of the story where silk and whispers turn brittle as old parchment. Because every secret wants to be kept, until the day it wants to be spent. And when it spills, when a masked giggle becomes a dagger at the throat of a noble name. Punishment stirs from its sleep like an iron beast licking its jaws. Picture it, the castle's inner courtyard, dawn frost still clinging to the cobblestones like salt on a wound. The hush of a sin discovered crackles louder than any trumpet fanfare. A young man stands there, cloak pulled tight, but it can't cover the tremble in his shoulders. Last night, his lips brushed a lady's ear, not his wife's. His name slipped from her mouth in a moment she thought no one heard. But someone always does. Now the steward circles him like a buzzard. Voice low, words soft enough to keep the gossip from leaking over the battlements. You know what you've done. His gloved hand settles on the boy's shoulder, a weight heavier than any chain. It must be paid for. The boy's eyes dart to the tower window where he knows she's watching. The lady whose silk still clings to his wrist like a ghost caress. He almost smiles, but the cold wind slices the gesture from his lips. Punishments came in all shapes here. Some obvious, a blade drawn bright in the courtyard. An earthen cell so deep the sun forgot it existed. Others more subtle. A title quietly stripped, a purse emptied, a betrothal canceled with a single line of ink. Sometimes, the shame was made public. A mask ripped away before the whole hall. The story laid bare, so no rumor could twist it further. They'd watch, wide-eyed, trying to pretend they were horrified when inside they felt only the sharp sting of relief. Not me. Not this time. Imagine the lady who slipped too many letters to the wrong bed. Her mask found stuffed into the rushes by a prying maid. One dawn, she's paraded through the lower courtyard. Hair unpinned, silk gown traded for rough linen. The household forced to watch her tears freeze on her cheeks. But just as the punishment falls, so too might a pardon. Because mercy here was never about virtue, it was a tool, a blade turned sideways. Picture the bishop's man stepping forward, voice oily as lamb fat. He raises a gloved hand. "Forgive her," he says, and the Lord beside him clenches his jaw, but nods. A purse passes from trembling fingers to the bishop's waiting palm. A favor owed, a debt quietly shifted. And the lady's shame vanishes into the hush of the chapel, traded for silence, for one more night where the door might slip open again. Not all pardons were so clean. Some cost more than coin. A knight who strayed too far might buy his absolution with loyalty sharper than any sword. Ride north. The steward would whisper, voice thick with cold and cunning. Win back land for your master. Bring back glory for your name. He'd ride, of course, frost biting his lips raw, heart hammering with the memory of warm skin and softer promises. Some returned with tales to keep the hush alive. Others didn't return at all, the snow covering their secrets as neatly as a priest's prayer. And what of the servants? They paid, too, when caught in the swirl of silk and rumor. A kitchen girl, eyes wide as a doe's, confesses to carrying a note from the wrong hands to the wrong lips. Her punishment is simple, a slap that splits her cheek, a threat that makes her mother weep in the dark of their shared pallet. But a pardon might wait if her tongue stays loyal, if her eyes stay turned to the floor. Sometimes the steward presses a coin into her palm, warm from his glove. You've learned now, he says. Keep learning. But even punishment could become its own invitation. A scandal public enough could be turned into a lesson, a warning to some, a thrill to others. Picture the gathering at the feast 2 nights later. The same nobles who gasped when a man's mask was ripped away now lean close over goblets of new wine, whispering the details with flushed cheeks. Did you see? They murmur. Did you hear what she begged before they locked her away? And behind every raised brow is the unspoken thought. What might they beg of me if I'm not careful? Sometimes the ones who betrayed were pardoned too. The worst sins were often rewarded if they bled into usefulness. The chamberlain who traded his master's secrets might find himself steward in a year's time, so long as the hush held, so long as he remembered where the bodies were buried and whose ring gleamed on which trembling hand in the moonlight. In a castle, it doesn't flinch at any of it. It hums with its new stories, tucks them away behind cold stone, and rushes swept clean each dawn. It knows that for every punishment, there will be another mask tied, another mouth pressed too close to secrets that should stay locked. It waits, patient as a grave. So breathe now. Let your mind drift in this hush of reckoning. The rustle of rough linen replacing silk, the clink of coin against trembling palms, the whisper of a blade drawn and sheathed again. Next, we'll slip into the final hush. The lingering echoes of those who vanished entirely, who slipped through the cracks of stone and rumor to become legends no one could quite name. But for now, rest your head. Let punishment and pardon settle on your pillow like a soft, weightless lie. The night will cover them all until the hush begins again. Next, slip further still with me into the coldest corridors of these old stones, the places where voices die out mid-whisper and footsteps vanish into cracks that never give them back. Because for every punishment doled out in public, for every pardon bought with coin or flesh, there were some who simply slipped away, as if the walls themselves sighed and swallowed them whole. Picture it, a cold dawn, mist coiled around the stables like a patient cat. A stable boy rubs sleep from his eyes as he leads a horse from its stall. He pauses when he sees a cloak trailing in the straw. Velvet, fine enough that its hem should never touch dirt. But there it lies, no boots beside it, no footprints leading away. Just that heavy hush of breath caught in the throat of a place that's seen too much to care. Rumors begin before the sun is fully up. A nobleman who should be dozing beside the embers of a dying fire has not returned to his chamber. A maid, whose laughter once trailed behind her like the scent of rose oil, does not come to warm her lady's bath. The steward counts heads twice at the gate, 3 times at the kitchens. But the numbers stay stubborn. 1 short, then 2, then 3. Sometimes they left by choice. The smart ones. The ones with eyes too wide and hearts too soft to hold the weight of secrets pressed between tangled bodies and half-drunk vows. Imagine the lady who tied on her mask one final time, slipped her ring into a lover's palm, and rode hard for the borderlands. Her gown snagged on brambles, her hair loose to the wind, each hoofbeat behind her another name she would never answer to again. Some swear she lived out her days in a tiny hamlet, tending goats, telling tales of a queen who once wore a fox mask and laughed at bishops behind closed doors. Others, well, they didn't choose at all. Picture the hidden cells beneath the castle. Rooms so narrow you can touch both walls if you stretch your arms wide. Straw for a bed. A single candle flickering in the damp, so the shadows it casts look like ghosts pressed into the stone. They drag you down there when your tongue wagged too freely or when a rival decided your secret was worth more without your heartbeat attached. Sometimes the door stayed shut for days. Sometimes forever. The guards would haul out buckets of bones when winter gave way to spring, so the rushes upstairs wouldn't smell too strongly of rot. Yet not every disappearance left behind a grave. Some simply dissolved. The bishop's man, whose purse grew too fat with hush money, found drifting face down in the moat, his ring finger snipped clean off. The steward's clever assistant, who knew which mask slipped off which face. One morning the chamber door stood open, the bed cold, the ledger with its tiny foxes and roses and crosses nowhere to be found. The castle folks spun tales, of course. They'd gather in the kitchens late at night, bread crusts clutched tight in chapped hands. They say she ran off with the masked knight. They say he became a monk, silent forever. They say the walls just opened up and took her. A shrug, a sip of cheap ale. Nothing more to be done. After all, stone has no conscience. Sometimes, the ones who vanished came back, or so the stories went. A shadow slipping through the orchard when the moon was thin and cruel. A rustle in the old hunting lodge when everyone swore it lay empty. Footprints in fresh snow, leading nowhere at all. A single scrap of velvet caught on a thorn bush, still smelling faintly of wine and candle smoke. You could swear you'd hear laughter on the wind, familiar but not quite. And what those left behind? They carried the absences like tiny bruises under the skin. The lover who found her ring returned in a pouch of black cloth. The steward who unlocked a chamber door to find the bed cold and perfectly made, as if the body that once warmed it had never drawn breath at all. The maid who swept a hearth and found a single golden hair coiled under the grate. A thread that unraveled everything she thought she knew. Yet the castle never flinched. It swallowed each vanishing as it had swallowed every vow, every sin, every sigh. Its beams stayed black with centuries of smoke and secrets. Its stones damp with stories that slipped between the rushes like restless ghosts. The hush settled in, deeper than ever. After all, it was easier to pretend the missing had never existed at all than to ask what price the hush might claim next. So here you lie now, warm in your bed, safe from the drafts that drift through those old corridors. Listen to that hush, that silence packed so full of all the voices that never found their way home. Imagine the brush of velvet across your cheek, the faintest echo of a laugh you can't quite place. Some who vanished never wanted to be found. Some still stand at the edge of the woods in your dreams, mask tied tight, beckoning you to follow. Next, we'll slip into the final hush, the lingering memory of what these nights left behind, the tangled myths and half-true confessions that survived long after the candles guttered out. But for now, close your eyes. Let the hush hold you. Let the ones who vanished drift through your dreams like shadows too clever to catch. Here, then gone, like the echo of a name never spoken at dawn. Next, let's rest a while in the hush that lingers when all the laughter has faded. The rushes have been swept clean, and the castle walls lie heavy with secrets they'll never confess. Because for all the silk that slipped to the floor, for every mask left dangling from a bedpost, what these nights truly birthed was something far more stubborn. Myths. Stories half true, half dreamed, carried from lips to lips, warming the dark corners of long winters when the wind howled down the chimneys like an old ghost begging to be let in. Picture it, a village inn decades later, where an old stable boy, now gray, back bent from lifting more hay than secrets these days, leans close to the hearth. The fire crackles low as his words slip out like honey mixed with vinegar. I saw them once, he says, eyes shining in the reflection of the flames. A line of lords and ladies masked like beasts, foxes and swans, slipping through the stables at midnight. They pay me not to speak, but here I am, and here you are. The children at his feet shiver, half from the chill and half from the thrill. They'll remember these words long after the old man's bones settle into the churchyard. Some myths linger in the stone itself. Picture a maid scrubbing the floor near the west tower, fingers raw from lye and cold water. She hears a giggle that doesn't belong to anyone alive, a breathy sigh echoing down the staircase when no footstep follows. She crosses herself, mutters a prayer, but the hush only thickens, as if the old walls want her to remember what they heard when torches guttered low and velvet gowns swept through the passage. And then there are the tales that slip into ballads. A bard, hunched over his lute in a smoky hall, singing of the queen who wore a fox mask and stole away into the woods. never to return, or of a masked knight who vanished into a snowstorm, his cloak found frozen to a tree branch, no body ever beneath it. The crowd leans close, eyes wide. They know it's nonsense, of course they do. But in the hush after the final chord, when the wind rattles the shutters, they wonder. The myths live in small things, too. A single glove found half buried behind a garden wall, pearl buttons still sewn tight. A ring slipped off a bony finger and pressed into a lover's palm with the promise, "Keep it until I return." But no one returns. The ring is buried with the old stories, yet its ghost lingers, heavy as gold in the pocket of a descendant who never knew whose throat once caught a lover's name when a candle burned low. Some say there were hidden books, ledgers scrawled in secret codes, listing each mask, each name, each sin pressed between fur blankets and candle smoke. They say the steward's assistant, cleverer than most, tucked these ledgers beneath a flagstone in the cellar. They wait there still, ink faded but not gone. For the day some curious hand pries up the stone and finds not treasure but the hush of ruin. A ruin that never cared for crowns or churches, only the soft promise. What happens behind the door stays behind the door. Until it doesn't. And in the fields beyond the keep, the peasants carry their own scraps of legend like embers in the hem of a coat. They whisper about the nights when torchlight flickered through the trees and the wind carried laughter that was not quite human, not quite holy. They say that if you walk to the hunting lodge at the edge of the forest on a winter's night, you can still hear the crack of a goblet dropped, the rustle of silk, the hush that follows a name you're not meant to speak. Time tries to wash it away. New lords take the castle. New banners fly. New sermons thunder from pulpits that have heard confessions older than the bones buried beneath them. Yet the hush lingers. It clings to the stone steps, to the heavy doors that once creaked open at a tap of glove knuckles. It hums in the corner of a chamber when the last candle flickers and the new bride shivers, wondering why the rushes feel damp beneath her feet. And what of us here now, you and I, wrapped in blankets while the shadows crowd the corners of your room? We're not so different, are we? We listen for the hush. We taste the sweetness of secrets never fully buried. We wonder if a mask might still hang behind a tapestry, if a servant's footsteps might echo in the corridor while no one watches. So rest your eyes now. Let these lingering myths coil through your dreams like ribbons of smoke rising from a snuff candle. Remember, behind every mask is another mask. Behind every hush, a secret waiting to be spilled or never told at all. Tomorrow, the world will look bright and ordinary. The stone walls will stand dumb and quiet. The fields will bristle with frost. The chapel will ring with prayers that sound so clean, you'll almost believe no shadows ever slipped through its door. But tonight, the hush remains. And you, drifting off now, safe and warm, you carry it with you. Like an echo, like a promise, like the oldest myth of all. Sleep well, and may the stone never tell.